Hello, my darlings, and welcome back to Radio Wasteland. Happy Labor Day. You are listening to your very own special show about the paranormal and everything spooky and strange and awesome. I'm your host, Chauncey Allworth, and this is my co-host, Sean. Sean, Hello. How are you doing this week?
Pretty good.
Sean, you seem to be like my yin to my yang of like being a treasure trove of totally pointless knowledge.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm a treasure trove of any knowledge, to be honest.
Pointless knowledge, I think you can confidently say.
Pointless knowledge? Maybe.
Might be a little bit of a oxymoron, but... So Jared and I are out front before the show starts, and there's some little Boy Scout taking down all the flags.
Of course.
For Labor Day. And they drop one on the ground.
Okay. And so he was shot on sight.
yeah.
Next anecdote. So this one.
So this is one of those American laws I've always been, or not laws, but
customs. You might say.
Like burning the flag is bad, but Aren't you supposed to burn the flag if it's touched the ground, like cremated or something?
You know, of the pointless knowledge that I am a treasure trove of, like the proper handling and care and feeding of the American flag, not really.
The proper feeding. Yeah.
I don't know. It is not really in my area of expertise, but I understand that, yes, when... I don't know if you're supposed to burn a flag if it touches the ground, but I think once it's become old and tattered or whatever, you don't keep flying it. You fold it up in some proper way, and then you burn it.
So you do burn the flag?
I believe...
I find that law to be a little confusing. I mean, I know it's not a law. I find that custom to be a little confusing.
I'm sure I'm saying exactly the wrong thing here, and I'm going to inspire a bunch of people to go out and burn their flags, and then they won't get into,
I don't
USA
think that's going to be a problem.
Something.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be a problem, But, and just as a reminder to people, it is not a law. It is totally 100% legal to burn your flags.
Of course. Because it's the First Amendment and so forth.
That's because we're Americans. Now.
Exactly.
It's definitely frowned upon.
Yeah.
I'm suggesting you don't go do it.
I mean...
And if you drop yours on the ground and it gets all dirty and you decide to lay it to rest...
I think
you might want to research that on the internet and not follow
you're allowed
to,
launder them, though.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
So...
But I heard, it's never supposed to touch the ground,
I don't know. Maybe the custom has changed a little bit over the years.
Totally. As with the invention of OxyClean.
Right.
Now things are different.
Now, okay, so here's the funny thing. We're two people having a conversation, right?
Yeah.
And normally in a conversation at this point, one of us would Google it and just, pause for a little while, and there would be this awkward silence. But we can't do that because we're on the radio.
No, yeah.
So, in a way, we're actually considerably less knowledgeable.
That's true.
Than two regular guys just having a conversation.
Right. So our conversation is a lot like dinner with your parents. You're not allowed to Google it.
Oh, but I Google things at dinner with my parents. We all do. No, okay. It's 2018. We just sit around a table looking at our phones.
Both my parents have passed on, but my dad definitely would not have had that. That'd be a no.
Okay, well.
But he was old, crotchety.
Exactly. So, this is the paradox of media, I guess. Here we are, and we have the platform, but because of the platform, we can't, strictly speaking, give you accurate or well-researched information.
Right, and so, seeing how it's Labor Day, we're sitting here talking about flags and what you should do with them. And so I have another bit of American news here that I think is kind of interesting. That is that Donald Trump thinks that... Now, let's take this out of this.
Sorry, you just said his name.
I know.
It was
chill, man, chill.
Okay, I'm chill.
All right, Donald Trump thinks that Google is out to get him.
Sure.
And,
he is very old.
Yeah. Well, oh, God, do we have enough time for this? Yeah, Jasmine, my daughter was like...
Kids, quit moving my reading glasses.
Right, Jasmine was reading me something to the effect of, people making fun of her hand generation and for not being able to do handwriting, and they're just all, oh yeah, well, Grandma, you can't turn on your laptop without getting 4 viruses and giving all your money to a Nigerian prince.
Oh, no
so
kidding.
It's yeah, so Donald Trump thinks that Google's out to get him.
Sure.
I have a day job, of doing SEO.
Right, you
search engine
understand the internet to the extent that
and
anyone
so
does.
personally, I don't think that Google is out to get him.
No.
But it is an interesting conspiracy because it does add to the potential of that side of the New World Order and stuff like that. But when my kid's asking me in the car, she's just all, so what do you think that means, that Donald Trump thinks Google's out to get him? I'm all, well, I think it means he doesn't know how Google works.
Sure.
You know, because it can be swayed because of the popular searches of what people are searching up.
Yeah.
And what people that don't really understand this stuff, including Donald Trump, don't realize is that when somebody in the limelight does something negative, both sides are searching for it by that negative term.
Sure.
That's spiking the search results in that negative term, causing that negative term to show up as number one. You know, so even if you say, you know, Dick Cheney shot that guy in the face, or did Dick Cheney shoot that guy in the face, or Dick Cheney definitely didn't shoot that guy in the face, all of those search terms are going to spike on Dick Cheney, shoot, guy, and face.
Right.
You know, and that's just the way that the internet works. And for those people who think that Google is so aware of their algorithm that they can tell you what's going to come up, they can't. It is just way too complex. It is, for any of you musicians or audio fans out there, let's say I have my guitar and I have distortion and I have reverb, and I run through my distortion pedal, it distorts the signal, and then I put reverb on it. It's now added echo to my distorted signal. If I move those two around, I am now getting an echoed guitar and adding distortion to the echo of the guitar. So by moving the algorithms around, you're creating variations, but Google has so many of these going on that nobody actually knows at Google how it works.
Sure.
And so people don't understand.
So we have the analogy that is perfectly comprehensible to people who are audio nerds.
Right, yeah, totally. Well, I figure everybody is here, you know.
Oh, well, not me. But
We got our buddy Connor here sitting in. He's
that's true.
Going to school up there, and he's learning a little bit about this. I bet you some of that audio stuff rang a bell with Connor. See? Target audience. He's nodding his head.
He's nodding. Okay. Well,
right.
You were right.
Yep.
Well, you know, in fairness to Donald Trump, the concept that Google is conspiring against him did not originate with him.
Yeah, that's why I didn't want to, come down on Donald Trump, because I'm aware that he's not the first.
Well, it originated on a news program that reported, you know, pretty much without basis, hey, the news is discriminating against Donald Trump, and he kind of picked up that idea and ran with it.
Right.
But,
and
you know, I don't think he did any thinking about, you know, the ins and outs of it. He just repeated what he heard.
Right, and the news is leaning on Donald Trump. I mean, that is happening. Yeah. I mean, look at OJ. Lots of people who, you know, kill people. But OJ was all over the place. Why? Because people were interested.
That is true.
All right, so that's enough politics.
Yeah. It's hard to avoid, because we talk about conspiracies and, you know.
I mean, they tend to tie into the real world.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, so maybe there is a grand conspiracy.
Exactly.
You know, but unfortunately, I think the conspiracy here is money and sensationalism.
Isn't that true?
So tonight, our guest, Richard Van Steenberg, Humanoid Aliens Live Among Us, here on Radio Wasteland. So come on back. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest, Richard Van Steenberg, and we are talking about Humanoid Aliens Live Among Us. Richard, do you have you there with us?
Yeah, I'm right here.
All right, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I am doing pretty good. Being that it's Labor Day, I'm enjoying some laborless day.
Yeah.
So, you know, got to start with the typical question, and that is, you know, how'd you get started in this? You know, what brought you from the daily life of the average Joe to really sort of understanding that humanoid aliens are living among us? You know, where did this transition happen for you?
So, for me, I definitely didn't take your traditional route that most people seem to have gone down. Basically, when I grew up, I wasn't interested in ET and I wasn't interested in UFOs. And what happened to me was I was really interested in air combat, and I would talk to a lot of the fighter weapons instructor pilots about how they would do air combat against, Soviet aircraft and enemy fighters. And as I would talk to them, occasionally I would kind of throw the question out to them, well, what would you do if you ran into a UFO? And they would basically just sit there and they wouldn't comment on it. And I thought it was kind of bizarre because they would spend all this time talking about fighting enemy aircraft, and then when I would bring up a topic about something that didn't seem to me that it would be an enemy, they wouldn't comment on it. So I thought that was kind of bizarre. And then I have a pretty high-level understanding of air combat, so some of the other things that seemed bizarre to me is I would ask them if you study the history of fighter combat. Fighter pilots like to fly in a two-ship standard operating procedure so they can provide mutual support for each other, and then they'll expand that out to a fourth ship, but they don't like to be operating in a three-ship formation because they can't provide mutual support for each other. And when I would ask them, why don't you fly in three-ship formations, they said it's not possible. And I thought that was kind of bizarre, too. And then another thing I noticed about them is I would see pictures of these same guys that I would meet, and in magazines and stuff, they would have their hands positioned on their hips, I couldn't tell at the time what it was, but it was clear they were making some sort of hand gesture. Well, so over time I started theorizing that if extraterrestrial pilots were, better than Earthling pilots, and if some of them were in a humanoid form, they could come down to Earth and walk among us, and we wouldn't know, we think they're Earthlings, and the first place they would want to end up is at the fighter weapons schools where the best pilots are, because they would be better than our pilots. So then another thing that started catching my attention is I ran across a picture of 3 UFOs in a formation one day. And I started thinking, I wonder if the extraterrestrial pilots understand how to fly in these 3-ship formations that the Earthlings don't natively understand how to fly in. And they're just a more adept pilot with better fighting tactics. And so I started, theorizing how they would fight in the 3-ship formation and be able to provide mutual support for each other. And then as I continued to look at people in pictures, I started noticing more and more people, not only in the fighter community, but also just in public, in the government and in celebrities, and all these people, even throughout history, and paintings and drawings, and they're all making the same hand gesture. And as I looked at it more and more, I started to come to the conclusion that what they're doing is they're making the letter E, which stands for ET, and they're basically leaving clues all throughout history that they've been here living among us. So for me, without even really understanding what ET and UFO were, I was already into one, humanoid extraterrestrials that have been living among us the whole time. And I was also realizing that when the UFO community, they basically just take this term UFO, which Edward Ruppelt and the Air Force gave us, and they basically say that a UFO is an extraterrestrial spacecraft. Well, if you really understand a lot about flying, it's not possible to fly in outer space. Technically, a wing doesn't provide lift up there, so you're using thrust vectoring or some other type of maneuvering and propulsion system. So I started to realize that the term UFO doesn't even accurately describe an extraterrestrial spacecraft because it wouldn't be flying. So as I'm getting out of college, back in the 80s, I'm already on a completely different track with HET, humanoid extraterrestrial, and CTV, celestial tackling vehicles. And I had to actually start going back and studying where did all these people in this ET and UFO community start coming up with all this information and what are they describing and stuff like that. So right from the beginning, I had a completely different perspective than everybody else that's describing what's going on.
So, you're talking about all this interaction and them, flying and their humanoid aliens live among us. Do they look just like us?
Yeah, I would say that millions of the most famous people on the planet are not from Earth. And it's been going on all throughout history. Ever since the cavemen, they've been living among us.
Right, but do they are they, at the risk of getting all Sci-Fi Channel or something, are they wearing human skin or covering up somehow, or do they actually just look like us?
No, okay, well, so the analogy that I try when people want to understand what's going on is if you look at the ocean, there's a myriad of life forms in the ocean. I mean, just almost an infinite number. Well, if you look in outer space, basically what you're going to find is a very similar scenario, kind of like the bar scene in Star Wars, where there's just a myriad of different life forms out there. Well, one of the life forms is a humanoid form. Well, so the mistake that the Earthlings are making is that we keep thinking that E.T. is, and he does probably appear in this 3-foot-tall, maybe a green guy with almond-shaped eyes or whatever, this thing you would clearly be able to identify instantly. What the Earthlings aren't realizing is that some of the extraterrestrial beings out there are in humanoid form, and they look just like an Earthling. It's just a humanoid being. So what they don't realize is that when one of those beings comes down to Earth, they can walk among us, and we just think they're an Earthling. They look identical. You could marry one and spend your whole life living one and having a child with it and just think you've married an Earthling the whole time. Except for the fact that they have other abilities, like maybe they could do mental telepathy, and they would also know how to get access to these vehicles to transit star systems back and forth and whatever other capabilities extraterrestrials have. The humanoid form, without them disclosing what they're doing, you just think it's an Earthling.
I see.
So I don't think most people on Earth have met these people in their lifetime and don't realize this. I use an analogy of if the Earth is an airplane, just to compare it, on an airplane, the FAA makes you have one flight attendant for every 50 people. So if you have 7 billion people on Earth using that type of a ratio, because they would have to control the planet and be able to have enough of them down here to keep things functional, there would be more than 10 million, potentially 50 million of them living down here. They'd be in all the different countries, all the different governments, militaries. They'd be all throughout Hollywood, all the business sectors. And the other thing is that because they would come from other planetary systems, they would have access to basically all the technology, where the future's going. They would be the smartest. They would be the most capable. They would know how the Earth is going to evolve. So they would be able to position themselves throughout history to make sure that they're the people. So an easy way is to go back and look at dead people. Like I would say people like Newton, Christopher Columbus, Ben Franklin. Anytime you can pull a name out of a person who's an extremely prominent figure, there's a high probability that that person was a humanoid extraterrestrial living among us, controlling the events on Earth to get Earth to evolve the way that they wanted to evolve.
So is there telling through autopsy or anything like that, or we're talking like it's straight up looks like a human?
Well, so I don't get into, if you took one of their bodies in terms of technical internal detail as to what would differentiate a humanoid extraterrestrial from a humanoid Earthling. What I basically focus on is, like a lot of people, when I bring this up, the first thing they do is they go, tell me for sure who one humanoid extraterrestrial is. And I go, you can't, because they're not going to corroborate it. They won't admit that they're down here doing what they're doing. So instead of trying to pick out one of them, the trick is to step back and look at the whole picture of Earth and understand the strategy of what they're doing and what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And when you see that, you can begin to see who some of the people might be that are these. For example, I use the statement that they're basically at war with us, but they don't fight war the way that we do. They want to control the technology of the planet, and they want to control the way the money flows into the organizations they want. So one of their key things they use is the concept of war. It's like a tool. So all throughout history, all the Earthlings think that we're fighting wars among ourselves. What's really happening is that the humanoid extraterrestrials are tricking us into fighting all these wars so that they can control the technology that develops from the war. Then when the war ends, they start another one so they can move on to the next phase, and this has just been going on throughout history. And they even leave clues on the planet so that you can go back in history and see that they're here, because when they disclose to us that they're here, the Earthlings aren't going to want to believe it because it's so bizarre, and they can't imagine that they lived their whole lives and weren't able to figure it out. So in order to reveal to the Earthlings that they've been down here the whole time, they've been leaving clues the whole time. And once you know that, you can start going around the planet and you can see the clues. So, for example, if you look at the 2 times that the United States has been attacked, Pearl Harbor and 9/11. So Pearl Harbor was December 7th. December is the 12th month of the year, and on the 7th day, 12 minus 7 is 5. The 5th letter of the alphabet is E. So if you were going to then leave a message, you would want to put a message that would also have the letter T with the next major word when we're being attacked. So 9/11, 9 plus 11 is 20. The 20th letter of the alphabet is T. So people hear that like, there's no way they're going to do something that simple and put it right smack dab in front of our face. I'm like, yeah, they are. It's that easy for them to do it, and the Earthlings simply don't want to believe it because they can't envision something so large happening right in front of them.
Richard,
and yet once you...
We're coming up on the commercial break. When we come back, I really want to kind of dig into what their intention is, because that's always been one of my biggest questions. You're listening to Radio Wasteland here with Richard Van Steenberg. Come on back. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest, Richard Van Steenberg. We are talking about humanoid aliens living here among us. Richard, every time we have a guest on that's talking about aliens or UFOs, which is common. It's a huge topic, of course. My biggest question that I always am really wanting a good answer from, and I understand a lot of people don't have a good answer because, like in your case, you're a researcher, you're putting this stuff together, you may not have a straight answer, but what is their intention? Why would they even come here? It seems like in your case, they're like manipulating us for control of natural resources, maybe, or something. What do you think the intention is?
Well, so I definitely have a theory as to what they're doing, and the hard part for people to understand is most people, when they think of things, they think of, it's Labor Day weekend, I just had a nice weekend, I got to go to work tomorrow. So they're a couple days in the past, they're thinking about today and what they're going to do tomorrow. That's like 72-hour window. To comprehend ET and their plan and what they're doing, you have to be able to take your mind back before Earth existed. So that's more than, 4.5 billion years, and you have to understand that there's life going on in outer space. These beings have the ability to create star systems and planets the way that we create housing developments, and they move to the new ones when the other ones die or when their systems expand. And they live in a completely different format than we do, in the sense that when they die, they don't die, just their bodies die. So they can put themselves in new bodies and continue to live on. So that's normal. What we see happening on Earth with people dying is not normal. It's the rare percent that they've told us this is what's happening, so we believe it. We don't realize there's more to life than what's going on. Well, so what they do in this rare case, because normally when they create a star system or a planet and they move to it, everyone on it knows what's going on. In our particular case, they've created a planet. They've essentially, I guess you could say, orphaned us in the sense that, they created us, so we're from them, but they're not allowing us to take part in their system. They put us down here. I would call it, they're at war with us, although they're not fighting war the way we do, and they're enslaving us. And so they planned all this before Earth existed. The plan is in play every day as it keeps going forward, and the plan is going to continue to go on even after they disclose to us that they're here. And so what we're going to see once we get disclosure is that there's life on all these other planetary systems with all these other beings all over the place, and they have a hierarchical structure similar to the way, there's poor people and wealthy people and all this other stuff. And the Earthling is a lower level being in the sense that we're treated or mistreated and being used as slaves for their advantage.
So, but of course, currency doesn't represent anything to them, American or world currency. So is it natural resources? Is it like gold? Is it rare earth elements?
Well, they would create the currencies down here to use it to manipulate us. But I would say that, so the average person looks at the planet and looks at the resources on the planet and how they would be using the Earthlings to manipulate those resources. I would say the single most valuable resource on the planet is a human being themselves. And so, for example, you know how people always wonder, why are the pyramids down here? If you study the history of pyramids and you go back to the gold rush in California back in the 1800s, I think, around that era, when a person would find a mine, the way that they would mark that mine, and it was called Mexican claim law at the time, is the person would put a little 3-foot tall pyramid towards the entrance of the mine, and that would be the sign that that person owned the mine. So if you just take that basic analogy of something we've been doing on our own planet, the reason the extraterrestrials would be putting those pyramids on our planet is to show the planetary identification markers of their star systems to show, hey, we own this planet and we're mining the Earthlings as slaves. And so the problem is that most people who are Earthlings don't think like that. They think of, well, are they taking gold? Are they taking, what mineral could they possibly want to get from this planet that has value? They can create all the minerals. They don't need those. They have ways of getting things that we have down here easily. The single most valuable thing is, if you go back to my theory, that from the first caveman, you've got 20 trillion beings approximately that have been on this planet, and those beings would all be alive on other planetary systems, and they would be continuing to use them as slaves out in the interstellar, intergalactic systems. And so when I talk about you have to be able to look back before Earth existed and see them planning this, what I call like an extraterrestrial architecture out. It's taking place on a day-by-day basis. And when they give us disclosure and we look forward into the future, that's just the plan continuing to go on, and they're going to be using us as slaves in an intergalactic or interstellar level, but at a higher intellectual level. And if you go back at Earth and you look at, remember when we had the slaves in, I think it was like the 1800s, and we freed them because the cotton gin could pick cotton faster than the slaves could, and so they all of a sudden they weren't valuable anymore, and we needed to free them to make them useful in society?
Yeah, I know that was a factor.
Same analogy on Earth, where the computer is basically going to be able to think faster than people, and so the people aren't going to be able to perform at the level that the extraterrestrials need us. So they need to raise our intellectual awareness level by informing us what's really going on. So in the sense, they'll probably be telling us we're free, but in reality, we're going to be slaves, but at a higher intellectual level. So if you go back to those people in the 1800s, they thought they were being freed. Well, they were free relative to, being in the United States, they're free, but they're still an extraterrestrial slave on the planet. They're just not aware of it. And so that's what's happening to us. You can look at Earth as like a mirror image of what's going on out in outer space and use examples of the events on the planet to prepare us for what's going on in the future. The problem is that most people find that because we've been raised in a society where we're not told the truth, so our minds aren't prepared for it, and we're not used to thinking in concepts like, 5 billion years before Earth, 5 billion years after Earth, people living among us are from other planetary systems. These are a lot of concepts that are foreign to most people, and you try and run it by them. It's just like, wow, that's just too much. I can't believe it.
To be fair, it is totally mind-blowing. I think about this with the government, like I'm supposed to understand about, global nuclear weapons and the economy and all this stuff. Yet if my car breaks down, I'm supposed to hire a mechanic because I have a job and kids. It's confusing and it's overwhelming. And, I'm even outside of the alien possibility, it is definitely something that I'm sure governments do to manipulate people in order to have them work. So are any of these aliens on our side? Or are we really just we're the sheep in this deal?
Well, that would be my opinion. I talk to a lot of people, and I think part of the problem I think Earthlings have is that I've come up with this term, human nature fallacy syndrome, where the average person, they want to hear good news. For whatever reason, I'm the opposite. I look for the worst case scenario first. I want to prepare for that because if I'm wrong and it's a good scenario, it's easy to recover from it. Whereas if you prepare for a good scenario and you're wrong and it's a worst case scenario and you didn't prepare for that, it's extremely difficult to recover.
Hope for the best and prepare for the worst.
Pardon me?
Hope for the best and prepare for the worst.
Yeah, and so most people, what they do is they hope for the best, they prepare for the best. A lot of people that I talk to about the ET phenomenon are like, there's a lot of benevolent ETs that are trying to help us. And my point is that if that was true, one, this never would have happened. Two, they would have stopped it because no good ET is going to allow this to take place. And so in my theory, basically what it is, there's good ETs and there's bad ETs, just like there's good people on Earth and there's bad people. The problem is that the bad ones are the ones that have the power. And in the end, you may be right, But it doesn't matter if you're right. It's the guy who has the power who's right simply because he has the power, and they can invoke whatever they want to have happen. So to me, part of the reason why I put that whole petition together, and I'm trying to get people, to be aware of what's going on, is that the Earthlings just don't really understand how to function as a group. They don't understand that the extraterrestrials have this ability. They can operate without being in uniform and still be in or out of the military, in or out of the government. They're very dynamic. They're smart. They understand how to operate as a group. The single thing the Earthlings are just failing to do is, and another perfect example is we identify ourselves nationally. We don't identify ourselves planetally in the sense that you and I say we're American citizens. Other people say, hey, I'm Russian, I'm Chinese. The reality is we're all on the same planet. We're all Earthlings, but the Earthlings don't identify themselves as Earthlings. So to me, the people on Earth have a couple basic things. If they would go around and start identifying themselves as Earthlings.
Well, hang on a second there, Richard. Hang on a second. We're coming up on our last commercial break here, and when we come back, I would like to run over the things that maybe we can do, like you're saying here, to really sort of understand this and do something about it. You're listening to Richard Van Steenberg here on Radio Wasteland. Come on back. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest, Richard Van Steenberg. We are talking about humanoid aliens living among us. Is it true? We're finding out right now. Richard, so this being the case, what exactly can we do about it? What would your suggestion to the audience be, to people be, to really sort of take control and get out of this situation?
Well, so there's, from the individual perspective, basically what people are doing that's not correct. There's a narrative going around on the planet, and everyone's got their own opinion as to what's taking place. And the reality is that Earthlings need to take control of the narrative, and primarily the civilian sector, not the military or government, the people who are the civilians. So the first thing they need to do is they need to start describing themselves or identifying themselves as Earthlings instead of focusing on saying, hey, I'm an American or I'm a Chinese or a Russian or whatever country they originate from. We're all on the same planet. We're all on the same team. The next thing they need to do is they need to, the terms ET and UFO, whereas they were helping us 10, 20, 30 years ago, they're actually holding us back now. What we need to do is we need to elevate the conversation to the term HET, or humanoid extraterrestrial, because of all the types and species out there, the only one that can walk among us that we can't identify is the HET. So if people would start bringing that into the narrative and discussing it each day, they would be elevating the conversation level at a higher level than what the government's speaking at. And then the third thing is that they need to realize that these vehicles that they're calling UFOs, the extraterrestrial spacecraft, don't fly. I can get into all the other more technical things that they're doing, like vectored levitation and all this other stuff, but the key is that if the Earthlings would focus more on trying to understand what flying is and what flying isn't, and stop using the term UFO, not completely, but be more aware of the possibility that these vehicles aren't flying, and when everyone just runs around going, oh, it's UFO, it's UFO, we basically haven't moved one step forward from Roswell, in the sense that by using that term, it's not allowing us to comprehend what's going on, and most people you talk to will sit there and go, oh, it's just semantics, it's just you're being too pedantic, you're being too critical. Well, if you look at all the other things we've accomplished, like hovering and rocketing and thrust vectoring and other types of maneuvering in the atmosphere and in outer space, no one has any problem with any of those. But as soon as you tell them they have to give up the term UFO, they can't take it, because there's a whole industry. You can make money on it. Everyone's comfortable saying that UFO, basically means extraterrestrial spacecraft. And the reality of extraterrestrials are they're technical, they're more complex, but the more it requires a better understanding of what's going on, and to really understand you have to be able to use the right terminology and the right concept. So those are the three things. One, identifying ourselves as Earthlings, bringing the term HET for humanoid extraterrestrial into the mix instead of just ET. And then, like, I use CTV for celestial TAC-1 vehicle, because celestial means they're from the celestial realm, which is anywhere in outer space. They don't even have to pin it down to anywhere. TAC-1 is the speed of light, which most people aren't even aware of. Like, they're familiar with Mach 1 being the speed of sound, but they don't even realize there's a term for the speed of light. And then it's a vehicle, so you've got another 3-digit or 3-letter acronym that you could replace it with. And another thing that people don't realize is that they want to be so accurate in the sense that they just want to call it a UFO so they don't make a mistake. There's this thing I have that's called the rule of one, in the sense that if you're sitting there saying that extraterrestrials exist and HET are among us on Earth and that they're called CTVs, you could be wrong every single time, and as long as you just get one right one time. So, for example, if everything that was moving by in the sky went by and I called it a CTV, you could sit there and tell me each time, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. Eventually, on one of them, I'm going to be right. And once I'm right forever. But the people who are telling me I'm wrong, they have to be correct every single time forever. So the statistical probability of picking the side of saying that this isn't happening, that this isn't the right terminology, basically the odds are way in the favor of the person who's, trying to use the right terminology and the right concept, because eventually it's like taking a test. All you have to do is get one answer correct and you pass the test. Everyone else has to get 100% on the test forever.
Well, let's say the time comes that we are all aware, and that, what does that fight look like, or is that even a fight? What will our awareness really get us?
Well, I mean, then again, this gets into theory, in my opinion, what's taking place. I think that, one, I don't think they want to come down here. Like a lot of people say, they're going to come down here and slaughter us and obliterate the place and stuff like that. I don't think they want to do that, because that's going to create mass chaos and panic. They have to do what I call flipping the planet, which means I think it's going to happen on a Tuesday, because between Tuesday to Thursday, you get 3 days in the middle of the week where the most information can be transmitted the fastest, because everyone's at work and everything's moving, whereas if you try and do it on a Friday to a Monday, the place slows down. A lot of people aren't at their key positions to transmit information back and forth. But they need to get the planet to be aware that extraterrestrials exist, that humanoid extraterrestrials have been living among us on the planet, that to whatever degree they're going to describe war and slavery and what's going on in outer space. They need to do it quickly, and they need to get the people to accept it and move forward. Otherwise, they're going to run into a problem where they've created this scenario and they did not maneuver it into position correctly and didn't transition it fast. It's sort of like an airplane going down the runway. There's a key moment when that airplane has to pick the nose up off the ground and start climbing away from the runway. Otherwise, it's going to run into a whole other series of problems, because it's still on the ground and now it's maneuvering too fast. They have to transition the planet through this disclosure phase quickly, and they've got to make it happen properly. If they have to come down here and start killing people in public in broad daylight, they're going to have mass chaos and panic and revolt on their hands, and nobody's going to listen to anything. They need to be able to have an intellectual dialogue take place on the planet and get the people to understand what's taking place and remain calm and try and realize the best thing you can do is pay attention and learn, because that's going to give you the best chance going forward at dealing with what's happening. So, in my opinion, people who are more aware will see disclosure as it approaches, because they'll be able to get a sense for the signs that are happening. I mean, you can kind of even get a sense right now, like you look at that, the F-18 Tic Tac UFO sighting with that Commander Fravor off the Nimitz carrier. That's the first time a UFO sighting has carried mainstream. You can see on Fox, CNN. Normally when people would see a UFO, they would just laugh at it and go, a crazy person's trying to report this, don't even talk about it. So you can see how they're bringing this stuff into the mainstream and making it more credible, and making it more desirable for the public to be able to talk about it without being seen as, fringe elements of society that don't know what they're talking about. And I think you're going to see more and more of that, they're going to try and make it become more mainstream, because they need disclosure to take place rapidly, and it needs to be in a controlled, calm environment. If it careens out of control, their whole plan that they've spent all these billions of years working on basically is going to fall apart right in front of them.
Well, Richard, we're coming up here at the end of the show, and I want to give you a chance to tell our audience a little bit about, where they can find out more about you, about this petition, and, where they can get more information about you and your message.
So the main thing is the petition's at extraterrestrialdisclosurepetition.com. It's just all one word, just like it sounds, extraterrestrialdisclosurepetition.com. And then I also have a website, etufodisclosure.com, where you can go and read articles I write about it, talk about it. You can contact me. I'm here to answer any questions people have. Most people find it difficult to pick up on at first. The way that I'm trying to explain it, unfortunately, it's not a simple, easy thing, even though it's down to, I've tried to take it down to just two acronyms, ATT and CPV. But if you really want to understand, you've got to be willing to put the time and the effort in to learn about what's going on. But if people are interested, I'm more than willing here to help. There's no cost involved. To me, when I was trying to learn back in the 80s, there was nobody there to help me. I had to figure this whole thing out by myself, and I so dearly wanted somebody just to sit there and provide some light to take me in the right direction. So the main reason I do it is simply just for those people who really want to understand what's going on and are willing to spend the time and effort. They've got someone they can ask questions to and at least offer them, my opinion and my theory as to what I think is going on.
All right, Richard. Well, we've really enjoyed having you on the show. You've been listening to Richard Van Steenberg here on Radio Wasteland, talking about humanoid aliens living among us. Come on back next time. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland. We've been listening to our guest, Richard Van Steenberg. He's talking about humanoid aliens living among us. This is not a new topic.
No.
As far as humanoids living among us, but he had...
Right, he had a different take on it.
Definitely this is sort of like unified theory where everything was tied in together and there was some like numerology up in there. There was, it was pretty intense, But as usual, it made me think of a lot of pop culture references. One is that, he's talking about the galactic caste system. And we're like the untouchables of India of the galactic caste system, apparently.
Apparently.
Yeah. And I did like his attitude of, you can't be a part of if there is a galactic civilization, you can't be a part of that while having different factions on Earth. You can't be a part of this when you're dealing with this.
That made a lot of sense to me. I wish people would take a more, global attitude of practically everything, frankly. But
well, that's the big political push in this world, is that they're having issues with globalism.
Oh yeah,
and stuff like that.
We're definitely living in a time of extreme pushback against globalism.
Right, but it's like during the break, Jared and I were just talking about vaccines and people coming down on vaccines and people being pro-vaccine. And this is kind of a prime example of where I think that there's a problem with the world. And that is that it's so black and white. People are just all, okay, there's a problem with vaccines. Let's get rid of them entirely.
Sure.
Instead of let's figure out what the problems with vaccines are so that we can make them better, because we obviously need them, unless you want smallpox or diphtheria.
Right.
And so this is very much the case with globalism and with, because it's going hardcore on both sides, On one side, everybody wants to be, or even on just the left, we come down on the right a lot because, we're lefties, but even on just the left, there's this fight between globalism and then cultural appropriation. It's like, do you want everybody to mix, or do you want them not to? Do they need to be separated in specific ways?
Definitely, this is something that kind of, it doesn't fit neatly into the whole left-right thing. Because, for instance, Bernie Sanders ran as for the United States, far-left candidate, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he was pretty, protectionist in his ideas. He was actually, in some ways, probably closer to Donald Trump than to Hillary Clinton, for example, in what he thought about, manufacturing, for example.
Yeah,
he would... He and Donald Trump don't see eye to eye on hardly anything, but, just in terms of, tariffs, protectionism, that kind of thing. They're more on that side.
The word nationalist has taken on this sort of racist overtone, but it doesn't really mean that. Both Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump were somewhat nationalist in their economic stances.
I mean, I think it's worth noting, for instance, that a lot of the countries that are very much admired on the left, your Nordic countries, your Denmark, your Norway, that kind of thing, all are very protectionist countries.
Oh, yeah.
They have extremely harsh immigration policies, and, to the extent... I think most of those countries are not part of the UN.
Right.
So that kind of thing. And yet, we think of those countries as being left-wing, but it's not quite so complicated. Today we have a right-wing president who is also very protectionist, and so the Republican Party is now kind of like the nationalist party, even though, most of the other people who were running against him in the primary would have disagreed with him completely. On that kind of thing. So
that's why they were calling him a populist.
Exactly.
Instead of a pluralist. But personally, I feel you should be a pluralist, or you're not representing everybody. But, Richard Van Steenberg's premise, the movie that he made me think of more than anything, is They Live. Have you ever seen They Live?
I'm afraid I don't know that one.
Okay, well, this is the ultimate selling point right here. It stars Rowdy Roddy Piper. And it's like,
say no more, Chauncey.
Yeah, no, it's so good. Haven't you seen the thing like where he puts on the glasses and he can see obey on the signs, and he can see that people are aliens, and he looks through a magazine, and when he has the glasses on, it says like consume, reproduce, and all this stuff, but when he takes them off, he's just reading time.
Okay, I think I've seen references to that.
Yeah, there's no way.
But I haven't actually seen the thing that's based
during the Trump election, there was a funny thing of him as the alien with the Trump hair on it, with the big bug-eyed things.
Right, yeah.
And really what he's talking about is very They Live. It's like very much the story of that. So I liked it on an imagination level, but...
Yeah, I wasn't too convinced, to be honest. But, I think that's common, as we've talked about before, when we have the unified theory guests who have all the answers. That tends to make me less likely to believe any of their answers.
Right. I think one part that definitely threw you off was when they start digging down into just like the ET hand signals,
right. It all seemed very
like the intergalactic crypts and bloods.
It seemed very associative. It seemed very this means something,
Right. Yeah.
And it's like I'm gonna need something a little harder than that. On the
other
hand,
too Dan Brown for you.
Little bit.
Yeah.
On the other hand, as a representative of the intergalactic alien oppressive overlords, I do, feel the need to use sarcasm and disingenuous logic to derail and misdirect everything he was saying. So,
right.
So you have to take that into account.
But I mean, maybe it is like wag the dog. Sometimes hiding in plain sight is really the best place to hide.
Yeah.
If you got a body in your trunk, you're just going to drive normal down the freeway.
That is true.
You know that.
Yeah, I don't like the way you were looking at me right there.
Yeah, we know.
You know a little too much.
All right.
Everyone knows, Sean. It's over.
My question to the audience is, does Sean have a body in his trunk? You're listening to Radio Wasteland. Come on back for the news. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland. Sean, you got some news for us?
Yeah, we got aliens.
Oh, well, that's fitting.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought so. So, on Wednesday, they were spotted above San Diego.
Okay. Military town.
Military town, yes. So, what was spotted by, dozens and dozens of witnesses who flocked to Twitter with pictures of it and so forth were orb-like sightings, essentially lines of orbs in the sky shining. So, no one really knew what to make of that. That's not true. Everyone instantly knew what to make of it. They were saying aliens.
Right.
Pretty much instantly.
Giorgio Sucralose.
I'm
not saying it was aliens, but aliens.
Exactly.
Right.
So, yeah, there were tons of Twitter posts, and they're all like, is anyone else seeing this? #aliens type thing.
Right, of course.
So, the Navy, as it does, likes to pop out and throw cold water on everyone's fun, and They have claimed that it was simply a military exercise with aircraft and flares. So, okay, problem solved. But the reason I bring it up is because that is... This sighting, down to the explanation given, is pretty much a dead ringer for the Phoenix Lights sighting.
Well, did you see any of the San Diego footage or things?
They look very similar. And in both cases, the explanations are the same.
I'll tell you, man, that Phoenix Light thing was not aircraft and flares.
Okay, so this is what I knew you were going to say.
Yeah,
and this
that
is
stuff is mind-blowing. Yeah. So
I feel like it could have been being seen at just, I don't know, a weird angle.
I don't know, man. Those things were so in perfect formation, moving together, that it definitely wasn't flares. You know, it might be. So I'm watching.
Well, so that's what it looked like in San Diego. They were all, in a perfect line.
Right. And so I'll put something out there to defend the perfect line. I watch a lot of History Channel, stuff like that, sort of nod off stuff,
Sure.
And
I'm a sleepy guy.
One of those cool tech things that I've seen on there is it's a truck, like a big truck that carries a bunch of equipment out to soldiers, right? And so this truck is driven by this guy, and he's driving and he navigates the terrain. It gets all crazy. Behind him is another truck that's exactly matching him, only, scanning the environment around it and compensating for whatever the front truck maybe have disturbed. So he's basically driving a caravan of trucks with one driver, but he can drive a caravan of trucks that are all matching his drive.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Right. And so this is a possibility for these flight things and these tests to be in this sort of uniform fashion without being connected. When you look at it, you say, like, all these lights are connected to some big freaky thing, some big triangular craft, which seems to be what people tend to be leaning towards now instead of the flying saucer. It gets a little less Ed Wood as a thing goes on. So there's maybe my scientific answer for it.
Yeah, but you're still leaning towards multiple craft as opposed to a bunch of flares.
I'm saying no to the flares.
Okay. Well, that's
because
what
you
the
can't do that
military
with a
is
flare.
saying.
Yeah, you can't do that with a flare. Flare's doing its own thing. It's dealing with the wind. It's dealing with air pockets and cold fronts and hot fronts. They're not going to fall or fly perfectly in uniform fashion.
Okay.
But you could get ships to do this, helicopters to do this, especially if they're tied in through a computer system and you're training them to do that,
So maybe it's, drones of some description. And the military
exactly.
Lying about that.
Yeah.
Lying
Maybe they're
about
testing
what exactly
out.
they are.
Right. Maybe they're testing out some sort of virtual multiple thing where basically one guy could fly in with a basic fleet, Ender's Game style business, and they're able to come in,
But they're definitely not flares. That's what you're leaning towards.
When I look at the Phoenix Lights, I did not see this one.
You have not seen these ones.
Right.
I can tell you they are pretty similar.
Yeah. But when I look at the Phoenix Lights, flares is really not an option. There's too much variation in the burn of a flare and all those things. That's just not what we're seeing.
You don't see it. Yeah, well, honestly, I would tend to agree. But I don't know if I'd say extraterrestrials on this one, but, No,
I'm comfortable with UFO, unidentified flying object,
Yeah.
Unidentified aerial object, maybe just to help Richard Van Steenberg with his hair splitting a fly. Well, I got what he was saying there. I get it.
To be honest, in situations like this, if the military were to say, were to just not say anything, it would be more credible than them saying it's flares.
Well, Jared just showed me the picture, and it looked like it had more flare potential.
Okay, so this one could be flares.
It looked a little more...
well, that looks pretty similar to the Phoenix Lights to me.
In this one, it looked like, at least in the photo that he showed me, it looked like varying levels of a light in a straight line, meaning it could have been variations. The Phoenix Lights, to me, looked very geometric, in their positioning to one another. But
okay, well, we'll leave it up to the listeners, I guess.
All right, listeners. Was it the military?
Yeah.
Or was it our alien overlords? You've been listening to Radio Wasteland. Have a good evening.
Thank you.